We're keeping that going. So a little bit about me. I've been here in a couple of capacities. One, my partner over at Lone Star Mental Health company I work for, he got pulled away, and asked me if I could step in about a week or two ago, and I was like, yeah. And then I was like, I got to talk about something. So, but I'm really happy to be doing it. I also serve as a pastor in Austin, with several different churches, which was kind of a brainchild of mine, because I specialize in mental health and substance use disorder pastoral care. And it's something that, for several reasons, I wanted to do. One, because there's a serious deficiency within churches to have qualified, ordained pastors that understand a little bit about what we do. Most of the time, when somebody calls up, says calls the church and says, my daughter's bulimic, my daughter's cutting, my son's having a schizophrenic episode. Church receptionist Judy, and I've met a lot of Judys, love Judy to death, but Judy's led a pretty square life, and pretty charmed life, and a blessed life. Judy's well-intentioned, but Judy's scared to death sometimes, actually. She's scared to death she's going to say the wrong thing. She's going to direct them to the wrong place. She's nervous about even the subject matter, and a lot of times, because when you start talking about sexual abuse and drug use and at times prostitution, a lot of the peripheral things that the trauma that comes along with mental health and substance use, it spooks a lot of people. So then it gets to the pastoral care department, and it's almost the same thing. You're dealing with a lot of folks that knew from a very young age what they were going to be, who they were going to be, and what they were going to do. They started a youth group, went straight into Bible college, finished up the seminary, came in as an associate pastor, worked their way into the pastoral care department, and they are, like Judy, very well intentioned, but not very knowledgeable about the reality of the situation that all of us in this room see. So how I wound up there is, for a good 17 years and about 3 presidents, I was a pretty raging alcoholic, drug addict, and had some pretty serious mental health issues. So I've attended substance use rehab at least 4 times, several detoxes, several psych stabilizations, countless ER visits, maybe like 4 in one night to find the doctor that's going to prescribe something to actually help me. And so I had some experience on the client, and I realized how you're treated. I realized that it varies place to place. I realized that you absolutely have to advocate. If you mean it and you want to get better, you have to advocate for yourself and basically shout somebody help. And then occasionally you will bump into the right person that is earnest and is having a good day and is willing to take that little bit of extra time to, what I like to call, break the fourth wall with you and sit there and have a real one-on-one conversation about what it actually is going to take, willingness-wise and effort-wise and time-wise, the duration of how long this is going to be to actually get better. So the topic that was presented to me was safety planning, which is huge, but more about, how I got to understand how important that is all those misadventures that I went on that landed me in those places. I had been told every step along the way what, either directly, indirectly, or off a worksheet that they handed me, about what it was actually going to take to get better. Sometimes, in fact, in the early years of all that, it was a bit of pride on my part, and the idea that the only way out of this is to actually pull myself up by my bootstraps and will whatever's going on with me into submission. Some very calm, very quiet voices were telling me that's not going to work. but it was counterintuitive to really everything I was taught growing up. I grew up in a military family, Marine Corps, and those are kind of hard charging, you know, grab life by the throat guys, and they're really good at it, and it works for a lot of people. A lot of successful people have gotten there that way. But when you're dealing with mental illness and substance use, the key is actually surrender, as we all know. So I had to combat that. And so with that being my baseline modus operandi and being told don't do that, I had to pick one. For a really long time, I picked my MO, and I got the results that we would all anticipate from that. Through stumble, I always say I had a little bit more buy-in every single time. And I started to listen more. I started to understand what they were saying more. I started to see success with other people that I had been around on the client side that came in as bad as me or worse than me. And I bump into them a year or two later, and they're the lights back on the Motel 6 back there. They revived. They seem great. I can see through action and what their lives are like that they've turned a corner. And I'm really grateful for that, because continuing to stumble after that, that was a nugget in the back of my mind that this is possible. And I'm really thankful for that, because if I didn't have that little nugget, I probably would have just cashed in my chips and got right out, because this was a really long, drawn out process. It was about 6 solid years of me finally deciding I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to get better, and thinking, okay, once you tap out, you're going to get better. And it just doesn't work like that. So there were a few key folks along the way that, like I talked about, broke the fourth wall with me. One was a gentleman that was a psych stabilization tech at a facility, and I was on my way out, had my stuff in my bag, my packet that they presented me, and he sat down. He's like, okay, so you're going to go home, you're going to do this, here's that. And he grabbed me by the arm, and he's like, I'm serious. Are you listening to me? I am serious. I'm like, yeah, I'm listening. Like, no, like, look at me in the eye. I'm serious. You have got to go to your IOB. I know you think it's a joke. I know you think you're going to be making popsicle stick and macaroni art and doing whatever, but this is a built-in process that's supposed to slowly give you some parameters to where you won't fall so bad. I did not heed the advice, but that was a nugget planted in the back of my head, to where when it did fail, I was like, shit, man, he was right. He was right. And there were other techs at the facilities, and there were other counselors that worked for the wall with me. There were many people along the way that built that little nugget into a much bigger one that was convincing enough, with that much evidence, for me to switch my MO to the solution that was presented. Now, sidetrack a little bit, back to the pastoral care stuff. I am a firm believer in the medical solution. And it has at times put me at odds with some of the other classmates I've had at seminary. But I'm walking, talking proof that a spiritual solution, as well as some clinical help, can get somebody a lot farther, in my opinion, than just one. And one of the things that I'm very passionate on in the pastoral care realm is not converting folks to come to believe that Jesus is going to solve all your problems, but actually working with the folks that are utilizing what they call spiritual bypass, basically being like, no, I'm not going to take that let's pray. I'm going to pray harder. No, it's all right. I'm going to read the Bible for 60 minutes every morning, and that's going to pull me through. It is a dangerous thing to get into, because either they're gonna have a pastor somewhere at, forgive me, because I know this is gonna be broadcast, some kooky church somewhere that's co-signing that and leading them down a dangerous path. And it's also dangerous because they feel like they're beyond reproach, and nobody, their mom can't come and tell them that's crazy. Their boyfriend can't come and tell them that's crazy. Their cousin, their boss, nobody's going to tell me what I religiously can and can't do. And I know what the solution is right here in this book. And I do think part of the solution, I'm walking, talking evidence that if you can come to believe in a higher power greater than yourself that loves you unconditionally, you are half of the way there. Because that eliminates the shame. And I'm a firm believer that shame is not a natural thing. Guilt is a useful tool, but shame's completely useless. But that spiritual bypass just leads to people being sicker. So I could have gone and done this stuff without any kind of education, any kind of schooling, any kind of credentialing, any kind of association, as a lot of people in mental health and substance use recovery do. But I wanted the ability to come in as a credentialed official person and say, my man, I talked to Jesus and he said, take your pills. And if you want to quote anything out of the Bible, I can probably contradict it by something else 3 books before and 3 books after. I have a summation of the entire thing, and I am telling you, as an official person, take your meds, go to counseling, do it. And that was the brainchild. That's what gave me the chutzpah enough to go to my wife while we were pregnant with our 3rd child and say, hey, I'm going to take about 20 hours a week and just work on this other thing. Because I saw the deficiency, I saw the need, I saw where I could help. I saw what people needed to get around that spiritual bypass thing. So on the pastoral care side, I work with all those churches. They call, I bump into that. Sometimes it's counseling, sometimes it's recommendation on treatment, sometimes it's just the families need more help than the actual client or the subject, and getting them. And this goes back to safety planning, getting them on board with what the reality of this is going to be about the timeline I was talking about. I was having a phone call yesterday with a really lovely family from up here in the Metroplex. And the mom was kind of on the fence about getting her daughter into residential. She's like, I just don't think she's that bad off, and she could go and do an outpatient a couple times a week. And in 6 weeks, she could make a lot of progress. I was like, she could make a lot of progress in 6 weeks. But if your goal is 6 weeks, we're wasting our time. It's going to take this gal probably a year, because her condition was that serious. She was reclusive, agoraphobic, hiding in her room, and just experiencing things that her family couldn't really understand. And I was able to very simply break down, like, this is a long-term process. And once you submit to this long-term process, there's going to be stumbling blocks along the way. You guys are going to feel a lot better when it happens. But just like the key to her solution is acceptance, it's also for you guys as well. So then I kind of went down the path with her on safety planning and other substance use sides called relapse prevention. But just having structure and a plan in place for the subject or the client as to what they're gonna do. And I think the term or the example we're all really familiar with is, we've all heard of HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Don't make any decisions when you're like that. That is the baseline or the example that I throw out to a lot of these families, because they've all at some point heard that, and they all have experienced hungry, angry, lonely, tired at some point. And I got to go eat a snack. I got to take a nap. I got to do this before I make a decision. Recognizing the HALT thing is a perfect example of that safety planning and relapse prevention. There's several other things that are indicators that you're on your way to a relapse. And when I say relapse, I don't just mean substance. I mean mental health. Shoot, you can have a relapse on a diabetic episode, you know. But there are several other indicators that let you know you're on your way to a relapse before it even happens. And a lot of those shift based upon the person. And teamwork is huge between the spouse, the family, the clinician, counselor, everybody, about individualizing that safety plan for that client and that subject who they are. So if somebody's baseline is outgoing, happy, and talkative and everything, and they wind up becoming reclusive and living like Howard Hughes for a couple of weeks, and it's like, oh, they may just be going through something. Well, yeah, they are going through something, and they're on their way, if they continue, to starting this process all over again. Sometimes it's eating habits. Sometimes it's not eating habits. Sometimes I don't eat until 5 o'clock in the evening. That's not because I'm on my way to a relapse of some sort. It's because I literally don't have time. Like I mentioned, I have 2 jobs and 4 kids. But for other people, that may be a huge indicator. So individualized to each person, collaboration between all the parties involved, and like I was talking about earlier, breaking the 4th wall. Because there were times, aside from the special individuals that I talked to, where I was handed a sheet that looked like it had been Xeroxed of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox, and real fuzzy, and in very in the terms and demeanor of your friendly neighborhood phone help desk. You're like, and here's your relapse prevention program, and here's your safety plan, and here's an appointment for you to follow up with a physician, and they hold it up.
To go read, and here's a website to go read. Just go do it on your own. Yeah.
And here's some resources and all that stuff. And I've been in a hospital ER withdrawing from alcohol and like shaking and been like, that's a big help. Thank you. Like I'm at that moment immediately concerned with not dying. Mm-hmm. And somebody hands me a worksheet, it's not gonna sink in that, okay, I actually have resources available here. Is everybody actually familiar with where the term break the 4th wall comes from?
Television.
Yeah, so if you think back to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or any other TV show where they're acting and then all of a sudden he looks at the camera and starts talking to it, that's the 4th wall breaking it. He breaks the paradigm, he shakes the audience, it's something special, it's something important, it's being told. So however you can get to the client and break the 4th wall, and that's different for every person as well. That particular individual I was talking about, he was a amateur MMA fighter, and a pretty man's man that he and I had connected on some level, and he felt comfortable enough and stern enough to literally grab me by the neck. Like, dude, I am serious. It's not going to be like that with a middle-aged woman that works at Joann's Fabric. So tailor breaking the 4th wall to each individual person, but always try and break the 4th wall if you can. And I know we have clinicians in here, retired clinicians, people from the school districts, people from everything. This is applicable to teachers, clinicians, techs, staff members, hospital nurses, everything. If one person can get to that client and break the 4th wall and explain the gravity of the situation, that plants the nugget. And that will go far at some point. And so we, at the other endeavor I'm in at Lone Star Mental Health, that is one of the things that we hone in on, focus on, makes our approach a little bit different, is they're getting the 4th wall broken with them 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day, while maintaining the professionalism and the level of care that's not just mandated, but the level of respect that clients should expect. So we're a residential treatment facility in Martindale. I'm willing to bet nobody knows where Martindale is in Texas. It's about 10 miles as the crow flies from San Marcos, where Texas State is. And I was not looking for a job when I started talking to them and they called me. They explained what they were doing. And in pastoral care, I had bumped into so many people that had substance use disorder and mental health. And it's like, sweet, let's get you in somewhere. But they were deemed too mentally acute to even get into treatment. Mm-hmm. And where's the bridge? Like I went through, you go through psych stabilization and they push you out the back door sometimes with a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox and say, good luck, and give you a bunch of meds without the ongoing care of a psychiatrist. I wound up in bed for 3 weeks one time because I had an adverse reaction to those kinds of meds. And so it fills a need, it fills a gap. We accept everybody with anything that rules them out from other residential treatment centers, active schizophrenia, eating disorders, some medical conditions, basically anything that would cause them to fail a pre-assessment and another place they start calling us. And then I met everybody there and I found their heart for this. And it was something I wanted to be a part of. So that's another thing. I went to my wife and I was like, hey, I know we're already busy as far, but this is going to complete my work because I've got the substance stuff. Now I've really found something that can fill the gap that I'm already experiencing on the health side. And I'm bumping so many pastoral care cases where they call up church receptionist Judy. Judy forwards it to me. I start digging a little bit. And moms thought that marijuana is the devil's lettuce since the 70s when the long hairs were doing things she didn't approve of. And her daughter's smoking weed twice a week and exhibiting very high levels of mental health problems outside of that. I have the objectivity and the experience to come in and say, I don't think in earnest that this is a pure substance use issue. I think we need to examine something else and find her some help. I thought I was just going to be working in substance use. I found through my own experience that, I was crazy enough to have a drug and alcohol problem. I didn't have the drug and alcohol problem that made me crazy. So having all those things and all those tools in my box has allowed me to be as effective as possible in my pastoral care work and the work I do at Lone Star. And I'm my feet are taped to the bicycle on the safety planning stuff and relapse prevention. Because I really, like I said before, if those nuggets hadn't been planted, I would have killed myself, honestly. There was a little flicker of hope there in my brain for a really long time, about 7 years. That got bigger and got bigger, and then it eventually produced results. But the implementation of that, like we're talking about, just breaking the fourth wall, getting them to understand that this is serious, getting the families on board. It's hard because everybody's working 60, 70 hours a week and they're channeling through about 10 clients at a time. So it's not an individual effort. If we can take that and that new MO and that ethos to all of our respective workplaces and get everybody on board, then at least one person's going to break the fourth wall with them every day. And then you start planting the seeds and eventually those germinate. So that's about all I have. I can open up for questions. Hopefully I stirred some up.
Can you tell us what a safety plan looks like and how to develop that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of that's establishing the baseline. If we're doing it correctly, it's establishing the baseline of what the person's actually like, what's normative behavior for them when they're solid, doing well, and you have some data to work with. Then figuring out what their standard non-normative behavior is and identifying the warning signs. If we're going back to HALT, it may be hungry, lonely, and tired is not a thing for them, but angry is. Somebody really pissed them off. Are they going to burn off and go drive around crazy for a couple hours and just do some stuff? So establishing that baseline, figuring out the client's individual patterns and behaviors, and the things that trigger them and pull them off. That's the beginning. Then figuring out who the players are going to be, and this goes back to that, how much it sucks to get a Xerox sheet of resources. That doesn't tell you who's going to recognize these things and who's going to put the plan in place. We can identify whether it's mom, roommate, brother, sister, teacher, friend, whoever's around the subject of the client the most to see those changes and actually implement the plan. That's going to give the plan a lot more efficacy. And then the secondary and tertiary plans after that, where if you do notice somebody's dipping, you catch it, you implement the safety plan, you get them right back above water. It might be time to redouble some efforts. If they're 8 months in and they've knocked down to 1 therapy session a week with their counselor, or if they're in substance use and they're only going to 1 meeting a week when they used to go to 4, everybody coalesces and gets around and says, we agreed that this is what we were going to do. And you dipped, we got you back, but you got to redouble your efforts. We got to take a step back. And we already knew that this was a long-term process. So this is part of the process. We're only here. We got a long way to go. So those are the main key points about actually making the safety plan work, establishing and developing it, and then implementing it. Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm just trying to put these together in my head. I did some years ago a RAP plan. Are you familiar with RAP?
I am not.
It is the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And so my diagnosis is bipolar. I had to do it twice, right? Because I had to do it once for the high and once for the low. But it helps you to identify how you behave at different stages of decompensating and what you can do. And then it goes as far as, if I end up in the hospital, who's going to come and water my plants and feed my pets. So I was thinking that is sort of an example of a.
Yeah. Okay. To me, that is absolutely a safety plan.
Yeah.
And follow-up question for you.
Yeah.
Because of my understanding on bipolar, that is again something you cannot pull yourself up by your bootstraps to get over if you're having an episode. So when you're developing those plans, is it okay? This is going to go on for 2 days, or this is going to go on for 7 days. We don't know, but we're gonna keep whatever phase we're in going until it's actually over and we're on the other side of it, or is it not that detailed?
So mine is that detailed. I've had to do several over my life circumstances have changed, but the initial one was very much. I was divorced, so I was trying to hold down a job. I had partial custody of my child. I sometimes they were with me, they were with their dad. And I needed to know what would happen to my kid if I was going through stuff. Yeah. Who should be called? Who should be notified? What hospital did I want to go to? Who did I want to visit me or not visit me? I mean, we went through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because you can't be out there hanging in the dark around, right? You've got to have your community. But your family doesn't always know what you do, even if you think you've told them. Right. And, sometimes you have people who are perfectly fine friends when your life is stable, but when your life is becoming less stable, they're not the appropriate friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very detailed, but there are people who do less detailed. And it really depends on the circumstances, but and you do give a copy to at least one trusted friend, so that as you're sliding through your process, somebody else is going, oh, no, you're doing this, we need to take these actions.
Yeah, that actually spurred a pretty important thing. I appreciate that question, because a lot of times people will implement these plans and relapse prevention safety plan, draft plan, and it goes well for a while. The client's situation changes. They may move out of mom and dad's house in with a roommate And mom and dad have looked at this like, this is success. They're out of the nest again. She's doing well. He's doing well. They're moving on, and they don't update the plan.
Yeah.
And then the roommates, there's a relapse of some sort, and the roommate has no idea what the signs are, no idea what to do, no idea that there's ever been a plan in place. Same thing with the friends that you're talking about. Like, you may switch employers, you may switch living situations, you may switch friends, which happens a lot. The people in your sphere will continue to come in and come out. I think at that point, the goal is to have the client see enough of the juice and the success of having that in place, having it worked a couple times to want to update it themselves, or hopefully get a few pokes from the therapist or the counselor that they're still seeing to make sure that that's updated, so that they don't fall through the cracks just because their lifestyle changed.
Sounds like a plan takes out all the deterrence for you to ask for help, or, because if you think, you're like, well, who's gonna water my plants and take care of my pets? And it just all seems so, monumental that you can't even begin. But if you have a plan, all those deterrents are taken away.
Yeah.
That you can start to recognize, all right, I'm slipping, I need to get back.
Yeah, 100%. And if they about diabetes, I must say diabetes like Woodford Brimley. Come on, man. If you have diabetes and you have a relapse on that, and you wind up in ketoacidosis and you're in the hospital, that doesn't mean you're a failure. But you surely have talked to your friends and families about, if that ever happened, who is going to water my plants? Who's going to walk my dog? You may go to your neighbor and say, like, hey, maybe not disclose the condition, but say, I sometimes have to go to the hospital. If you could just, if something happens and I have to go and I text you, could you just keep an eye on the house? Like, there's a lot. This goes back to the shame piece of having a medical condition as well as a spiritual one, but the shame's keeping you from doing the things that are going to make sure that you're better. And I've reached a level of comfortability now to where, like, this is going to be broadcast online. I don't care. I don't care. And that's why I'm better. That's honestly why I'm better. I tried, anybody ever watch Mad Men show? There's a scene, I think in the first season, where a gal winds up in a mental institution, and her boss comes in and says, fake your way out of here and pretend like it never happened. It will shock you how much it never happened. And she does. And it's a really bad example because things actually wound up going well for her. I tried that. I tried being like, that was a phase. That's not me. That's not my identity. Because it's not. I share these things, but that's not who I am. It's just something I have to keep an eye on, just like somebody with diabetes or anything like that. But once the shame piece got removed, and I'm not embarrassed about talking about it, and the more I share, the more I can help, the better I got. And that's part of my safety plan, actually, is I have 6 guys, because I am also a big fan of guys with the guys and gals with the gals. I have 6 guys that I talk to pretty much on a daily basis. If they don't hear from me for 2 days, they all start talking to each other. And that's beyond my wife, that's beyond my employer, that's beyond everything else. I have places I go twice a week that I've gone to for the last 4 years and maybe missed twice. And if I'm not there, I start getting texts and calls. If I'm convincing myself there's not a problem, they'll see it before I do. And I wouldn't have been able to get to this current situation without getting over the shame, which I'll reiterate again, from a pastoral perspective, I am firmly convinced that shame is a weapon of death. And I'm not trying to get woo-woo or weird or everything, but it is counterintuitive to survival. It is counterintuitive to getting better. It's counterintuitive to having a happy, healthy, loving life. If it doesn't make any sense, then I'm convinced that it's not the way it's supposed to. So, and then back to the thing I was talking about much earlier. If anybody, you guys are all gonna have my information. If you ever have a client, a friend, anybody that is using spirituality as a deterrence to actually getting better, feel free to have them call me. My feet are taped to the bicycle on that particular thing, and I love just canceling that objection out, canceling that deterrent out, that hurdle. So yes, very long-winded answer. I'm sorry. Anybody else?
I was,
Yes, good.
what you're saying is awesome, and I wish that other hospitals, treatment places had that policy. But they don't. I mean, like I have this kid who's basically, ruining his life in an IOP. And they're like, oh, we don't do substance use. Well, he's got substance use and like probably 3 different mental health conditions. And he just got kicked out, so then he just like used drugs. He's like
Yeah.
still doing it because like, oh, we don't do that here.
Yeah.
And then they don't give the parent any resources either.
Yeah.
So it's just like they're just floating in the wind. So I guess my dream as a trauma therapist working with people that have issues and the substance use comes because of the issues, right? Like working on that, like
Yeah.
and a collaborative system that's just
And that's
overcome with, oh, it only pays for it. You're gone.
there's nothing more aggravating than going to Walmart and you're in the clothing department and you're looking for something in automotive and being like, hi, do you know where steering wheel covers are? And they say, well, that's not my job.
Sorry. I don't.
Now, when it comes to your life's on the line, if you can find that steering wheel cover or not, there is literally nothing more aggravating. And like I mentioned before, I was the client that got handed a Xerox of the Xerox of the Xerox and boilerplate language that came out. And I took it as seriously as the help that was offered to me. And it's a sad deficiency across the entire scope of our industry, whether it's the hospitals, whether it's the IOPs. But it really only takes one person within the organization to do that culture change.
I believe that's true.
Yeah.
Over the course of my 26 years being a counselor, that, like you're saying, nugget, like small change leads to bigger change, and even if, it takes a while. I think each time you're building more and more. I think the other challenge is the whole natural support thing. I work with clients who are isolated, and they're dealing with their trauma. We specialize in like DV, and so they've been controlled, they're isolated, and we're saying, hey, you gotta meet some people, you gotta have some people, and just taking those steps takes a while to get them. To reach out, like, hey, go to a church, go to a group, because they're scared.
And we can't implant willingness,
Right.
right? And I mean, I know at one point I was withdrawing off of Klonopin unmonitored, and I developed what I thought was a phony, like Macaulay Culkin disease of agoraphobia, which you can see I'm a pretty outgoing guy, but I was literally, I would poke my head out of my room and just my heart would start beating, and I'd start getting anxious, like I felt like I was going to pass out. And this went on for a couple of weeks until I realized that the only way I'm going to get through this is by going out of my room, walking to the gas station, even though it's a half mile, because then I've got cars rushing past me. I've got people talking on their cell phones. I'm interacting with a person. I'm rewiring those neural pathways in my brain to kind of get over this thing. Laying there is not going to do it. Fortunately, I can almost chalk it up to stubbornness, but I was willing, like I was willing to go do it.
Well, that's what we do in, the counseling I supervise. It's like the small steps. Like what is the smallest thing you can do to interact with a person that could lead to something? And then we check in on that. How do we do more of that? Like, I think just what you're saying, sitting with someone, individualizing and being collaborative.
And it's hard to get them to find a tribe
Right.
as well. I mean, especially in cases where there's not substance use involved. Because 12-step programs are the most welcoming places I've ever been in my entire
Right.
life. And I'm a pastor, I'm in churches a lot. But 12-step, they will let anybody in and they don't kick anybody out. And you are free to be as crazy as you want and keep coming back to the work that you work. When you're not dealing with the substance use piece, then it's like, where do they go? But the first step on that could be any kind of other support group, and they may not like it, but as long as they go, right? As long as they go. I do 90 pull-ups a day. I hate every second of it. But I'm trying not to let the old man in. I'm officially middle-aged, so I still hate it, but I know what happens when I do it. I feel better. So yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say this conversation has me thinking a lot about something we talked about, is like the difference between like talking to someone and talking with someone. And I think like even just that simple language of, we're yes, we have to give you the papers, we're supposed to give you the resources, and here's the copies. But like, how can you do that and actually talk with this person so that you ensure like, it's not just a checkbox for you, but that they actually comprehend and understand that they feel seen in that conversation. Because it is easy for us to just go on autopilot, because you think about how many times that woman is giving that paper to these people that are like checking out all the time and this, that, and the other, but it's like, if it becomes mundane and we're only talking at people or to people, then that relational piece of it just drops off. Which isn't good for us either, like it's certainly not good for our client, but it's also not good for us, and I think like that will lead to burnout faster than anything else too, because we forget our why and we forget our purpose, and it becomes like, oh, I just have to go get these papers and I have to have these conversations and I have to, yeah, so I just think, I talk with our counselors, like, when you're talking to kids, this is happening. When you're talking with kids, this, capability is, can happen. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and we can't be on every day, all the time. But if you got 2 or 3 people that you work with and y'all get on board with that same mission, somebody's going to be on that day.
Right.
And this goes back to my old 12-step recovery stuff, progress, not perfection, right? Like as long as I'm striving to break the fourth wall, as long as I'm striving to overcome the fact that I got 4 hours of sleep the night before, I've got a kid that's sick at home, and my wife's stuck with them, and I'm stressed and everything. So I'm trying to overcome that. My success rate is going to be a lot higher than I was trying at all. And if I got a few poor people around me that are of that mindset as well, somebody's going to be on that day. But I'm not Superman. Like I have bad days more than I have good days, like personality wise. But I try to overcome it. But yeah, it's tough. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'm very new to counseling, so I'm just trying to understand, like, how do you, distinguish like breaking the fourth wall versus like calling the friends? Because I sometimes as a friend, just counseling my friends, like I really consciously try to fall back, like not tell them what to do, because they're not me, so how do you distinguish that?
That's a good question. I have very strong conviction about not telling somebody what to do unless they absolutely need to do it. If I'm dealing with a young person that's snorting fentanyl, knowing that it's fentanyl every day, and they got a loser boyfriend that's doing it with her too. I'm trying to help him as well. I'm just saying he's not somebody I'd want my daughter dating at that moment. I feel absolutely comfortable looking somebody in the eye and saying, you need to stop snorting fentanyl, and you need to have a plan in place, whether you stay with this guy or not, whether you stay in this apartment or not, whether you stay at that job or not. I'm not going to tell you what to do in those other, but we need to have a plan to help you stop snorting fentanyl. Same way I would do if that boyfriend was to a domestic abuser, as opposed to just abuser, or a ne'er-do-well. Say, I don't care what else you do, but this is not where you need to be. You need to leave for a while. Maybe you guys can patch it up later on. I don't know if he gets some counseling, but I feel 100% confident saying that you absolutely need to get out of here. So I guess to answer your question, pick your hill to die on, but be prepared to die on that hill, because you're going to meet with some resistance from time to time, every excuse in the book as to why they can't do it. But as long as you're willing to die on the hill and say, no, listen to me, this one thing, stop putting fentanyl up your nose. And here's how you do it. Are you willing to do it or not? There's less meandering, there's less weaseling, there's less of this other stuff. And we can't do it with everything. It gets trickier. It gets trickier when you're dealing with some other things. Like bulimia is one that I think about, and eating disorders, because you still have to eat.
Mhm.
You still have to eat, but I'm not encouraging people to overeat. And I've never experienced an eating disorder myself, but I know that purging is something you absolutely have got to fight against for the rest of your life, and keep your mental state good enough to where that's not something you're going to do. I stand on business, as the kids say, and saying that to anyone that's going. The rest of it's negotiable, but it is hard to tell people what to do, and at times it feels like I'm yanking people's agency away from them a little bit. But when it becomes a life or death situation, I'm fine with yanking that little bit of agency that somebody has for those 5 seconds while I'm talking to them, saying, I am looking out for you. I love you. I want you to be okay. Here's what you need to do. And they can take it or not take it. It goes back to that willingness piece.
And there's always a chance that they still won't do what we say, but at least you could go to bed at night feeling like I said what I felt like I needed to say for the sake of that person, and really it's.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that's where that Marine Corps upbringing helps me quite a bit. I grew up around hard men doing knife hands, telling you what to do, and sometimes it was good advice, sometimes it wasn't, but at least it sunk in. It was there. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it's on, like talking about the traffic on a bigger scale, like a focus group or like a classroom size with youth instead of just one?
I'm sorry, I'm half deaf actually.
Oh, I'm
so-
sorry. Do you have any tips on how to talk about it in a focus group or in a large classroom setting of young people instead of just one-on-one?
Oh yeah. So we're particularly talking about adolescents.
Yeah, the safety thing, like, yeah, adolescents and substance prevention, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think pretty much what I've just done for like the last 30 minutes is best, but adapt the message a little bit to adolescents. But it is such a great time to even be a little more stern with them, in my opinion, because like I just talked about, they're getting people telling them what to do all day, every day, and they're disregarding 80 or 90% of it, unless it's something that they want to hear. But maybe going over the top, getting louder, visuals, like examples. I mean, scared to death or scared straight was a thing for a reason. They go into prison and they show you what it's actually like, and it just, the reality of it hits them much harder than just saying like, now don't do this or you're gonna go to jail. Getting people to act in their own best interest when their frontal cortex is not all the way formed is so hard. And they're gonna bump into so much in the years following. But if you can present that in a way that it at least sinks in a little bit, you got a little bit of a seed. a little bit of a nugget later on that they can then look back on and be like, you know what she was talking about when she was going like this across the room. You know, she's probably right about that. The kid stuff is hard. And you know, I got a lot of young kids at home and I'm terrified, you know. So I give it your best effort, I would say. And kids, unlike adults, tend to have more friends. And so if they can be more intentional about their friends and how they communicate with them and how they look out for each other, kids are forced to isolate less than adults. So I would say that would be the choke point that I would use. Your friend groups.
I've always heard that you don't change people's mind by telling them your opinion or what to do, but opinions or minds are changed by stories and the way that you tell a story and so.
Yeah, 100%. The way the message is delivered can't be the same for everyone. Yes, ma'am.
Looking back now, what do you think would have helped you when you were younger?
Oh man.
What message?
So I had a fairly burgeoning alcohol problem all the way up until I was 22. And the week that I turned 22, I broke up with a gal I'd been with for 4 years. And then 3 days later, my oldest brother died in the line of duty as a police officer. And so I already had a problem. And those two things happening right then, right there, caused my brain to explode. And I don't think there's anything that can prepare you for that or to help you stay vigilant against that happening and how you react to that at such a young age. Like we were just talking about the kids, right? I mean, I was a 22-year-old with maturity of a 15-year-old. And if y'all ever meet my parents, I think they'll agree. But it literally caused my brain to explode, and I couldn't process it. It was too much, and I was reliving it every day when I woke up, all over again. And I don't think there was much preparing for that, but I do think on the problems I had developing before that even happened, and going back to the kids, I think it was pretty clear evidence that I had very weak coping mechanisms. And the ones that I had were not healthy. The healthy ones were weak. And if somebody had yanked me aside and not just said, hey, you're drinking too much or you're doing this, but been like, hey, have you ever tried exercising when you feel like you're gonna have a panic attack? Have you ever, reached out and confided in somebody when you lock yourself in your room for 2 days to drink? Nobody presented me with any solutions. They just said what the problem was. And except for the solution of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which wasn't great. Didn't work. Oh, yeah, I am also very grateful that I experienced every single thing and having come out the other side of it and working in churches and working with Lone Star and having the experience and now being on the other side and breaking the fourth wall. Listen, I sat in your chair. You're here for the third time. I did it 4 times. Like, get rid of the shame. Let's figure out how to actually fix it. So I mean, I am grateful for my experience. Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking too about, like us who work with the kids and the teens. I mean, obviously given your lived experience, like alongside what you would have wanted to happen to you, like what can we do with parents when we know a kid is struggling, when we know, short of us, following our protocol and calling them and recommending an eval and all those steps that we take. I mean, what do you wish someone had talked to your parents about or encourage your parents to do during that time?
Yeah, I think my parents in particular, were great. Like they're fantastic people. They're loving. My dad in particular, like, he was a fighter pilot in the Marine Corps, got out, went to law firm administration. So he sets his mind to something he does. He was determined that he was going to fix me. And I think the most frustrating thing he's ever experienced in his life was that he tried and tried and tried for years and he couldn't. And him and my mom, I mean, she had a big old corporate job in San Antonio and was even reaching out to her employer assistance program there to see if there were any resources for her, for me, for anyone. They were hip to try, anything. Um, I do wish, I think that, and this is a controversial thing to say, I wish I had hit bottom a little faster. Um, I think in the, because even after I hit bottom, I was lingering there and bouncing off the bottom for a couple of years. But it was only a matter of time for me lingering there for a couple of years and not having the golden parachute and everything. When it really did sink in on me, 100%, like nobody's coming to save you, Chael. You have the seeds, you have the nuggets, you got all the stuff I'm talking about. You either need to use them and get better, or you're going to die. Now, there's several steps along the way that happen there, and some people get half of those steps down, and with help of their family, with help of their community, and everything, they come out of it. So I'm not advocating, ripping away support. In my particular case, I think with my personality, we individualize these plans, right? In my particular case, my brand of stubborn, my brand of selfish, my brand of crazy. I think I could have gotten to the bottom a little bit faster. And I think that would have got me better. It would have got me to a place of willingness. So whatever parents can do to increase the child's willingness, whether that's through consequence, but you can get to a little carrot and stick argument, but consequence, reward, breaking the fourth wall with them and letting them know, like, I'm not telling you what to do because I'm just in charge of you. I'm telling you what to do because you're ruining yourself. And my parents did do that. I wish that when somebody asked that question, I could come up and say, like, well, my dad was an alcoholic and had a family across town, and my mama was hooked on the crack pipe. And I raised myself on cans of beans every day, but it just wasn't the case. I was a lucky guy who had a couple sad things happen that I can make some sad noises about, but the problems were already there to begin with. And I just had a road I had to walk with some help from people to get there. And when I finally got people back, I was 20 times more grateful to have them in my life than if I had just had them all along, took them for granted. So yes, ma'am.
You said in the beginning, you said your dad was like fixated on fixing. Do you feel like sometimes with parents that is what causes more of a problem for the child? And the only reason I ask that because you get so fixated on fixing somebody, you miss the support kid. Because you're focused on the change in them instead of hearing them and letting them be seen and seeing what they can do on their own. So like for you, it worked out the big thing. Like nowadays for like this generation of kids, if you're so fixated on changing them, you miss the supporting.
Yeah. I am fairly confident that my kids, I've got 8-year-olds and a 10-month-old or an 11-month-old. They're a different breed of cat than I was. And my parents were a different breed of cat than I am. I don't know what it's going to be like when my kids are 13 to 18. Societally,
Yeah.
social media maybe. I think they're trying to pass it to where you can't have a social media account if you're under 18 now in Texas. I don't know if that passed or not in the last legislature, but I see a no. Okay.
Because who will regulate that? How will that ever be regulated?
Right.
But I mean, that could be a thing that changes. Technology could get reined in, could discover that we're ruining everybody. The dating landscape could be different by the time they turn 16. I'm going to, and knowing everything I know, having every experience that I've ever had, and being a professional in this industry, not just on the clinical side at Lone Star, but also on the spiritual side, pastors' kids have problems, you know. And I'm become one with the fact that I'm not going to make the mistakes that my parents made, but I'm going to make all kinds of new ones and different ones, you know. And hopefully, though, my kids are double winners, both of their parents. Myself and my wife have had issues like this. If we're looking at the nature of it, it's a statistical possibility they're going to have the same problems that I have. Hopefully, though, my own network and my own village is going to help me piece together the right thing to do with those moments. But the amount of parents I deal with that are the problem, astounding. It's astounding, and it's never that they're always outside of the Goldilocks zone, right? They're either helicoptering, trying to fix their kid, or trying to be the solution themselves, or they just call up and say, "Well, I'm dropping them off and I'm done with it," like forever. And more times than not, you meet with that kid whose parents just said, "Well, I'm dropping off and I'm done with them," and he doesn't believe them. And then 2 weeks later, mom sends him $3,000, and he's back at it. You know, so I try to veer toward. I'm lucky enough that I deal with adults that act like kids, and their parents maybe have some arrested development in terms of parents that they're still doing those things I'm talking about. To where I can look at them and say, like, dude, this dynamic with your family ain't it. It's not gonna, they're not gonna fix you. They're not gonna hurt you. Like, they're not responsible for any of this. They didn't cause it, and they're not gonna cure it. The solution lies within you and your network of who you put together and your team and everything. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
They kind of own their own stuff here. I mean, all addicts love to blame everyone else for their problems.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite thing. Well, if this hadn't happened, or if you hadn't done this, look what you made me do. But they had nothing to do with it. Yes, ma'am.
All of this is amazing. I work in a child welfare system, and there is in Texas a very fine line where we are telling parents who are coming in with substance use disorders to say, you gotta get sober in 6 to 8 months when you want to get your kid back, right? And so on top of that, there's mental health issues and domestic violence issues and there's just general, like, I don't have a house, right? And so my biggest thing that he said is, like, families also need help in the reality of the timeline. And I think within the child welfare system, we need a wake up reality call that 12 months is not enough. I work with the legacy court here, the drug court program here, and they often have extensions, up to 18 months. They're very flexible because they meet within their week. And I'm seeing the change, but that's 5 cases in compared to how many cases come into the child welfare system. And so my question is, like, in your line of work, what is that, I don't know, that big piece of advice for the child welfare system to say, one, I've come to learn, like, relapse is a part of recovery. And when we're telling parents who are in the child welfare system, they're hearing this thing of, like, you have to build a village to get better. But in the child welfare system, you're stripped of your village because they're not safe. And so who then do you turn to? So, like, what would be your biggest advice for child welfare professionals to understand that 12 months is not enough?
Yeah.
And that just because a parent has lost rights on previous children
that's a big one for me because, like I've gone to court and testified on behalf of people that I know that have gone through this stuff, at about the 18-month mark. And I've had the CPS, agents, while I'm on the stand, basically say like, Mr. Shaw, can you guarantee that this person's never gonna use drugs again? And I say, I cannot guarantee I'm not gonna use drugs myself before I leave this courthouse. And anybody that got up here is lying to you if they say that. But in this particular case, with this particular individual, I have seen a miraculous transformation in 18 months. The willingness is there. The actual walking it out is doing it. And they have an accurate representation of how to get better. And they're doing it, that if they keep up what they're doing, they've got a good chance. And relapse is part of the recovery. But the gentleman I'm speaking of in particular, on that particular one, he's one of those 5 guys that calls me every day. And he has orchestrated his entire life to where if he starts slipping, his friends are gonna catch him and they're gonna alert the grandparents of the child, the other people that are peripheral, probably CPS, probably his lawyer. If he chooses to continue to falter and fail, that they're gonna actually step in and help protect that child. But that's not mandatory, right? You can't make people have that kind of earnest drive around them. And to be honest with you, someone else with my exact credentialing could get up on the stand and completely lie about that, or not have the intelligence to realize when somebody's taking it seriously enough to get their kids back. And that's the impossible predicament that the folks of CPS are in when they're asking those questions when somebody's on the stand. They're looking out for the best interest of the child. The child can't advocate for themselves. The people that the child's insulated with are all problematic and trying to get better themselves. If I could speak to somebody high up in CPS or welfare or something, I would encourage them to, because this is something I never experienced and I want to, is to have them not just do a home study, reach out, but if the person's in recovery, have them go and meet with the people that they're associated with in recovery. Have a look at their life. If he says, oh, my buddy Bill's, I check in with him every day and he's doing great. And they go and meet Bill for coffee and he shows up and he looks like crap. He acts like crap. He talks like crap. And he clearly works a crappy program. You have some evidence of what that person's success rate and the recovery actually looks like. That's the proof that's in the pudding. That is the pudding. But I've never encountered. I mean, I work with so many people that are in current CPS cases. I've never once had anybody from the state reach out and say, hey, we want to talk about your assessment of what this person's actually going through, what their recovery looks like.
Yeah, they don't do that. I work with foster and adopted kids, and the foster kids, they never check on them for counseling at all until they need notes for court.
Yeah.
I need notes, I need therapy notes. I'm like, go away. Like, you don't even care about this kid or his placement or his parents. It's just checking boxes. And it's so rude.
Yeah.
I'm always like, no.
Yeah.
I'll send them later and I don't send them. Because you go to boy or therapy notes, but you don't really care about this kid.
It is one of the most necessary and toughest jobs, I think, within the government.
It really is.
Is stepping in and advocating for kids with people that are having problems that don't necessarily make them a terrible person, but put a defenseless person in harm's way. But if I could wave a wand and be like, this is going to help some of that, would be for the state to go and investigate what the person's life actually looks like. Not when they tidy up the house because they know that there's a home visit coming on, or rushing to a drug test, or how long they've been employed, or how long they've been sober or dry, or not having a manic episode. You know, it's the looking at the whole person and the whole life, seeing what's going on there. I don't know if that's ever going to be possible. It's a bandwidth thing, right?
Rather than preventive, you know, it's state driven. It's not, I mean, counties can't decide how they want to run things, child welfare, all.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed in 26 years, and it's probably worse now than it's ever been. The only good thing is they're not ripping kids out as much because of their lawsuit and all that stuff, so they're kind of like still scared to, which is fine, because I think when you take a kid out, it's hard to get a kid back. So it's better to work with the kid and family in their family. Get them in an IOP, don't like rip them out and say, go to rehab, like, you just took their kids, that's a trigger to use more.
I know that actually probably doesn't answer the question. It's just the,
It was just something that I really want, I mean, I think all this presentation was amazing, and again, I think, as you mentioned, because we're all very different professionals in this group, and I just kept, like, throughout your entire presentation, I just kept thinking about the chocolate or something, that's where I work.
Yeah.
I've been there for 7 years now, so it's a very, the system in Texas is not.
But individual people like you.
Yeah.
Cause I work with great workers, there's some people that are amazing and there's some people that aren't, you know, it's not because. And it could be because they're overworked and, you know, all that kind of stuff, it's a hard place to work.
But I think all the, like, again, like, you gave me nuggets today so that I can then turn around and use those nuggets with the stakeholders that I work with my, you know, coordinators that I work with, to say, it's gonna be slow, but if we use this language, if we connect with this, because one of the biggest things in our program is that we trust parents. That is one of our pillars that we will die on, the hill that we would die on is that we trust parents. And not a lot of people do that in the system. They come in with mistrust. Parents come in with mistrust for accurate reasons. But being there, week after week, day after day, that's what's. So I just appreciate everything that it was a really good perspective for me to take on.
yeah. Quick question for you. Do you feel like on an individual basis for yourself, you would even have the autonomy to do that? Like what I'm talking about, of just when you bump into that, do you have the time, the bandwidth, the everything to be like, okay, you say you're working, let's go straight with substance use. You say you're working a good program in substance use. Who in your network can vouch for that has significant recovery? And can I talk to them?
So in our program specifically, yes, because although we're a very small program, so let's say in Dallas County specifically, I only have one coordinator here. She gets about 20 cases a year. But she's invested throughout the entire duration of the people. And so there's one person, one case, she was checking up with them on a weekly basis. And so one of the things that we actually just came up with, well, it's been implemented for a year now, but it's a worksheet, so take that where you will.
What is it? Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. Straight from the printer.
But one of the worksheets that we created was in conjunction made with a parent, because she's like, I don't know what this looks like. And so when we were talking about building your support village, and I'm like, okay, who makes you feel heard? Like when you feel sad, who's the first person you think about going and talking? You know, who is that first person that you think about when you're doing something that you enjoy? And so like we work through that together to then identify people in their system and say, oh, I always think about Susan when I'm thinking about gardening because she's a great gardener. And then who's Susan? I was like, oh, Susan is like my third grade teacher, but she's like my neighbor. Oh, great. Can we talk to Susan? Oh, I haven't talked to her in like 6 months. Let's talk to Susan, right? Let's build that support system back in. But again, long story, but to say, yes, within our program, there is the capacity for our coordinator to say, let's make these connections. We haven't talked to this person in a long time, well, let's reconnect with them. Because I think that that is building a different system for our families to be successful in the long run.
I'm really warmed to hear that you guys have that bandwidth, that ability to dig deeper.
And that's where we support caseworkers. Like, I wish that was the one thing that caseworkers would know about our program, because a lot of the times caseworkers are like, don't step on my toes. Like,
Yeah.
that's my dog. I'm like, we're helping you with your dog. Like, we don't want to take your dog. You do that thing, do it well. Ish. But I'm here to take some of that capacity load off of you, because you are a reward. And I can do the relational part, and I think that's where we have a strong suit, is to focus on that relational.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I thank you so much for that. Probably one of the biggest bummers I've had in this journey is not that dealing with CPS is a bummer, but the situation that causes CPS to get involved, and then you're really off to the races from then. And back to the willingness piece and what you were initially asking, like at the onset, the CPS can't force somebody to have the willingness to get sober. Going to jail can't have somebody the willingness to get sober. Consequence in going to jail is not enough to get people to, if they don't have substance use, commit to taking their medication for day of restricted mental health. It is just the hope that the timeline coincides with that they can get better while they're in that process. And it's heartbreaking when it doesn't, but it's more heartbreaking because I know the reality of the fact that if here's the timeline of them getting better, and here's the timeline of CPS, the odds of them being overlapped perfectly is really low. You know, there are good parents out there that can't get sober for their child.
Right.
It's sad.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And just make sure you, not registered, but sign the check-in sheet, and then I'll send, everybody's contact information out later this week with the presentation. And, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.